And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting show lined up for you today, and I have a question for you. It's a great topic, and I had a guest on my show not long ago that really brought this into focus for me. So my question for you is your advisor agnostic? And should you expect that? Do you know what that is? Well, a lot of times the word agnostic is used to describe somebody who maybe has questions or is skeptical about God's existence or humanity, our ability to understand Him. Well, it can also be used in another way. It can be used to describe somebody who is noncommittal or has doubts about something or is neutral. And so I had this come up not long ago, actually on this radio program. I was doing an interview with an author who's also a financial advisor. And she was talking about how she does what she does in her practice for financial planning and helping people figure out how to get retirement income. And as she was talking about it, she said, well, I don't really care what product or service I recommend to the person. I just want them to have the right things for them. And since she goes, I'm a product agnostic. And it kind of struck me as an interesting way to put it. And so when I think about it, that is a good way to approach it. And I like that. It makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. So the obvious question then is, should you, in working with an advisor, whoever that may be, should you expect that person to be an agnostic, to be able to recommend what's best for you without perhaps a bias or a limitation, some sort of external limitation? And so that's the question I want to answer on today's program. And so the first thing to know about whether an advisor can be this practicing agnostic is whether or how they are employed, or whether they're independent or they work for somebody. Because here's the reality. Here's the inside scoop on the world of finance. If an advisor works for a brokerage firm or an insurance company or some other company or person, then their employer is going to tell them, there's going to be a list. They're going to have a list of things that you can recommend and the things that perhaps they can't. But generally it's, hey, here's a list of the things that you can recommend to the clients of the firm. And so that relationship with the employer dictates what that advisor can recommend. So that advisor might want to recommend something in particular to a client, but if the company that they work for doesn't allow it, well, then they are not a practicing agnostic. They aren't in a place where they can be neutral. To put it a little more bluntly and a little roughly, they have to sell what's on the truck. They have to recommend what's available through that employer. So if it's a brokerage firm, the representative, the broker, is employed by that company. If they work for an insurance company as an insurance agent, they work for that company. Those companies are going to say, here are the things you can use. So that puts the advisor in a position where they may be limited in what they can offer. Now, there may be other choices they have available that are just as good, but there is an inherent limitation. The other thing that's really interesting to point out is that it's not about whether that advisor is a good person or whether they are knowledgeable. I'm not talking about that. I know a lot of advisors that are very nice, they are knowledgeable, but because of their employment relationship or the structure of how they do work, they are limited. So I'm not talking about personality, I'm not talking about likability, I'm talking about the person's ability to make an independent or unfettered, unhampered recommendation for their clients. Now, the other thing that is really essential here, it is, how do you know whether or not the advisor is limited or whether they can be agnostic or not about the recommendations? There's only one way to find out. They're not going to volunteer this information, okay? There's only one way to find out. Ready? You got to ask. You have to ask, how broad are your choices? Are there any limitations? And there's two ways to approach it. You can say, okay, talk to me about the things you can recommend. Talk to me about what's available through your relationship with the company you work for. You're at ABC firm. What can you recommend? What's available? But then an equally or perhaps even more revealing question to ask is, what can't you offer me? And so by asking these questions, you can get a sense for what's available. Now, I've had people ask me questions over the years about what they want to know from me is what makes me different, what makes my firm different. And it's a great question. I wish everybody asked it of every advisor because they'll get an earful or should get a good understanding of how that advisor works. So when I get that question, hey, what makes you different from other advisors? I've got a lot of answers for that person because a lot of this has to do with how I do business and how I believe it makes sense to do work for clients. So number one, we're independent. We're not owned by anybody. I don't work for a brokerage firm or insurance company. I don't have somebody telling me what to recommend, what not to. The other thing is that we have a lot of latitude in what we can recommend. If I think that an insurance product or an investment product is the right thing for my client, I can recommend those things. There's not really any limitation. I might use mutual funds, stocks, bonds, real estate, investment trusts, REITs, annuities, other types of investments that are available, and usually there's a combination that we will work with to get the right mix for a particular client. Now, the other thing that is notable or different about how we do business is that the investment decisions are made in my office. I have a team of professionals who work for me and help me with managing the investments. The money isn't managed off in New York or by a robot. It's done by people in my office that I can sit down and talk with about how we're managing the money and how we're picking what we want to recommend to our clients. So the ability for an advisor to know how money's being managed is helpful for you to know that. The other thing that makes us different is we charge a fee instead of a commission for managing investments. So we get a percentage. It's called a percentage of assets under management. This is something you want to know if an advisor can do this for you. Not all advisors can. Not all advisors are set up that way. What that means is that that puts me in a fiduciary capacity to help the person with the things that make the most sense for them, and we get paid a fee for doing it. So if the account gets bigger, we make more money, the client has more money. If the account falls in value, we make less. So our financial outcomes are tied to our clients' outcomes. Now, another thing that is important to know about an advisor, and this is a big part of what we do, is we also do taxes. So we don't have to shy away from tax questions as it relates to the investments. You know, we don't ever say, well, consult your tax advisor to go and find out about the investment recommendations I'm making to you, the tax implications. Those tax answers are part of our recommendations. And if we're going to be making changes to a portfolio, we assess the impact from a tax perspective. And we do tax returns. We have 2 CPAs in my office, so that's an inherent part of what we do. In fact, we've got 16 people that work in my office to help me do this work. Now, you won't know all that unless you ask the questions. Now, I've given it to you as an example today so you can understand how advisors work, but the key is you have to ask questions. If you don't know the right questions to ask, I've got a book for you, How to Get Great Advice and Avoid Scams. You can have all the questions you can know to ask an advisor to learn these things about how an advisor works. You can pick it up on Amazon.com, or you can visit with me, stop by my office, meet with me about your situation, and I'll give you a free copy. But these are the ways to know whether or not your advisor can truly be agnostic.